Hi. So I bet I have to follow up that question. I hope it doesn't take time for my thing. But how many of you tried virtual reality, were walking around? Uh-huh. And of that group walking around, how many found it to be amazing? OK. So it's people who are sitting down, maybe not so amazing. But I'm going to talk about walk around most of all, and this is why. So here's the deal. If you go to the movies, right, you're experiencing it with your entire body. If something scary happens, you jump, right? And virtual reality really should be and is about the same thing. In fact, kind of times a million. My very first experience with VR, where I understood this to be true, was in a lab in Barcelona run by these couple, Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives at the University of Barcelona. And they were studying the bystander effect, right? But you can't put people on scene at a real violent event. You have to do something else. So they built a VR experience where this kind of drunk guy gets off the bar stool and he's going to attack somebody who's wearing the wrong sports clothing, right? And I remember, this is quite a few years ago, and I remember this feeling of like the cable, I'm trying to get closer, and the headset's connected to the cable, and I'm straining to go, oh my God, what's going on here? And that was a moment when I realized I didn't want my audience out there. I wanted my audience in here. So at that time, I was working as a research fellow at the University of Southern California. And the students were putting together this, there was a class, we're putting together a piece on hunger in California, the Golden State, which is like the United States breadbasket. So how could people be going hungry there? Food banks were overwhelmed. There was all these problems. And having experienced the piece in Mel's lab, I was like, hey, who wants to do a VR piece with me? And put people on scene. And not a single student raised their hand, right? Everybody thought I was nuts. And so with $700, and I found an intern who was actually a finishing high school student who was friend of a professor's, daughter of a professor from another university, we started recording audio at food banks. And she came back to my office having been at this long line, and a man with diabetes didn't get food in time. And he collapsed. His blood sugar dropped too low, and he went into a diabetic coma. She brought that audio back, and sobbing. And I realized that this is what I want to build with. And please be aware, we didn't even have GoPro cameras at that point. So it's all real audio, and we had to rebuild it. If you went to that street, you'd see that same gum on the ground. Humans were different. You had to be donated and then animated. But here you see that guy, he's in the room, right? He's wearing these big old goggles, but he's going to be very careful not to step on the seizure victim. Because as far as he's concerned, looking down at that person, he's there. Even though he can see outside those goggles, he's feeling completely like he's in the room with what's happening. So this was now fall of 2011, and it got into Sundance Film Festival for January of 2012, which was very exciting, except for the fact that there was only one pair of goggles. There were these. They were called the Wide 5, and they're $50,000 a pair. And the head of the lab's like, you're not taking those anywhere. So we had to get busy on building goggles. And luckily, there's a kid kicking around who had been making goggles in his garage, and you can see sort of faces planted in there, and we're trying to figure out how to get some goggles sorted. And we show up with something that looks like this, big duct tape, bulky box, right? And so I don't know how people are going to behave. And it's opening night, and I've got my cell phone out here. I actually have some other footage of this too, but the cell phone footage is pretty amazing up front. So you can hear the surprise in my voice, right? Astonishing. And this happened over and over again. People trying to talk to the seizure victim, be on the ground with them. And just a quick side note, if you look at those goggles, you can see under the PR4, it says Palmer Luckey, which some of you may know. Then at that point, was crashed in my hotel room, as like my intern at the festival, driving the truck back. 9 months later, he does a Kickstarter for Oculus Rift. 2.5 years later, he sells it to Facebook for $2 billion, ends up on the cover of Time magazine, and gives us our most memed cover of Time magazine, right? Okay, but back to hunger. And why were people down on the ground? Why was their whole body involved with this experience? And why does this work so well for putting people on scene at real stories? So I'm going to go back even further to the 1990s to something called the Rape in Cyberspace, which some of you may recall. It was written by a guy named Julian Dibble, and it was about a text-based virtual world that some guy hacked into and started raping women. And the women were incredibly upset. And this brought up this whole dialogue, like, why would women who have no body there, nothing's physically happening to them, why do they feel so upset? Now, I was taking students into Second Life. I had built the virtual Guantanamo Bay prison in Second Life very early on, and I wanted to look at sexual harassment in Second Life. Now, there was a lot of research already being done on how women in the offline world and on web pages or bulletin boards found situations more harassing than men did. And I wanted to see if that was true in Second Life as well. But, and certainly the stuff I got back was pretty amazing. I was rounded up, virtually raped repeatedly. The third time, someone attached a giant penis over my head, right? And kind of craziness, and here's a little video that we captured, which kind of gives you an idea of what a flying penis might come and sort of touch your head, right? Completely absurd, right? Not surprisingly, just like in all the other instances, women found the situations more harassing than men did. But here is something we didn't expect, and I was working with Jackie Morey and Matthew Curtis on this project at USC, and we realized that we had the data that on enough men who played women as well, because we've been collecting these sort of anonymous surveys. Now, because we hadn't set out to find out, we didn't ask them, why they were playing women, and there's all kinds of different reasons. It isn't necessarily they want to be a woman. Sometimes you feel like people are you're more approachable, et cetera, et cetera. And the amazing thing about the results was that men who were playing women in VR felt more upset than the women did when they were harassed. It seems that your virtual self, your digital sense of presence is extremely powerful. They were taking on a whole other form, and yet they felt really upset and connected. And again, the researchers Mel Slater and Mavi Sanchez, rare response as if real is what they call it. So I started applying all these ideas to what I named immersive journalism. And back at USC, I was introduced to the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and he tried hunger, pulled off the goggles, and immediately commissioned me to make a piece about Syria. And I particularly wanted to focus on Syrian refugee kids. This is now I've got a big budget of $35,000. I sent a team to the border of Syria and Iraq to capture material under that budget, and we constructed a piece. And here's a little trailer. So to give you an idea of how carefully we reconstructed it, this is one of our pages from our art Bible, where we tried to make sure that from the real source material, you would be able to have exact matches in the virtual world and the digital models. And it did very well at the World Economic Forum, Peter Gabriel, John McCain, and this is back in 2013, right? Which is really sad considering where we are now. But then I went to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and they put us in the tapestry room, right? And we weren't advertised, so if you saw this little sign, come on in, that was it. And here we were with our crazy big equipment and old and new technologies of storytelling facing off against each other. And at the end of 5 days, unadvertised. So anybody who came in, all ages, all over the world, who experienced it, we suddenly, had this incredible outpouring. They wanted to fill out the guest book. We ended up with 54 pages of guest book comments. Incredible stuff, absolutely fascinating, totally believable, empathy for global citizens. And then there's this one in which I think I'm the most proud, and hopefully I can read it from here. This was a very difficult piece to experience from a Syrian whose family is still living in Homs. Although I felt that the piece was inappropriate at first, I've certainly changed my mind after experiencing it firsthand. It is so important for the world to bear witness to the situation in Syria, and this is a powerful and effective way to do that. So why do I use digital technologies that are reproductions versus using video? So this is a shot of a 360 video still from a project we've been working on with two guys, Trevor Snap and Sam Olsen, in Sudan, one of the forgotten wars. And the footage is coming back incredible. But when you shoot in 360 video, even though it happens like around you this way, you can't move. You can't ever get any closer to the image. You can't get that full embodied walk around experience that I'm so compelled to try to get you to. And why is that the case? Well, we used some 360 video, and also we used the digital models to really put you on scene in this piece in which what it's like for young women in America trying to get into health clinics, Planned Parenthoods, et cetera. And we had some footage to show you kind of what the setting was like, but then we put you in where you had to cross the line past people who are yelling at you. How did we do that? We scanned virtual humans so that we have these much more lifelike people, and then we have to animate them with their facial, et cetera, with real audio from what gets shouted at young women across America.
You're a whore. You're a whore. You're a whore. You're a little whore. How about stop being a whore? You whore? Shame on you. Start closing your legs. Start having some respect for your body. Maybe your parents should have aborted you.
So that's all real audio that he's mimicking. And now we're taking this even further. That is not a photograph, okay? What that is photogrammetry. Along in a partnership with America's premier investigative documentary series, Frontline, who had incredible access on solitary confinement cells. Some of you might have seen the Guardian piece or heard about it. The audio came from them. In any case, or a lot of the audio did. In any case, in this cell, we had access to it, and it's exact photographs of a cell, but you can walk around inside this space. This was made by a local company in Berlin, Realities.io, who I sent into this main prison to take those pictures. So when you're walking around that space, you are walking around the exact cell, the exact footprint. You are in the room. And we all know being there is the most important part of understanding almost anything that's happening. So then what? You got to put the people in there. How do you do that? Working with another company called 8i, doing volumetric capture. Every still of that you're looking at, that is all video. And each bit of that video moving means that I can now put you in the room with somebody who is videotaped in volume. You can literally walk around them. And this is important because all the major chips, Qualcomm, Intel, they're going to let you do this with your cell phone. So you'll be starting to capture your world journalistically, nonfiction, friends, family, whatever, in a volumetric way. So the next part, of course, is the pipeline. All of the major headsets actually let you walk around. So for journalism, I think this is really, really important. And the costs are coming down and down and down and down for us to make these pieces. So I'm going to leave you with a little video of what I also think is going to be the future of journalism. And it was an experiment we just published on. I have a company, Emblematic Group, but I also still keep up my research place on what it means to be actually embodied in something while you're doing journalism.
Do you hear me now, Noni?
Mucho gusto, eh?
Nice to meet you. Molt de gust.
Yes. I'm from Los Angeles, California.
Welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguda a Barcelona. I don't know, Noni, if I could ask you to raise your arms. A veure si pot aixecar els braços. Ja veieu que els aixeca. Keep them up, because now we'll show the robot. I ara anirem a veure el robot, que ja veieu. Can you move them a little bit more? A veure si els pot moure una mica més. Up and down. Doncs ja veieu que el robot reacciona perfectament amb la Noni. Noni, I'm ready to interview you now for a few minutes. Li farem una entrevista a la Noni per veure què li ha semblat aquesta experiència. You're a journalist, ella és una periodista, i fa una estona ha entrevistat un científic de Barcelona. You just interviewed a researcher from Barcelona, but in a body of a robot. What was that experience like?
So for me, it starts to feel very natural after a while. Occasionally, there's some problems with the eye movement in my head if I move too fast. But beyond that, very quickly, I'm there in Barcelona with you.
So thank you for letting me come to Berlin and be in person, but maybe next time I'll be here as a robot. Thank you very much.